Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Today is Friday, of course, Friday mid-morning. I hope you take the next hour not as an extra hour of work, but an hour to sit down with a nice snack, a coffee, a tea, something pleasant, and that you make some time to join this conversation, this reflection on rebuilding Ireland with purpose. Clearly an exciting Friday ahead. We have a potential confirmation of a new government. RTE does comic relief this evening, and I'll come back to that in a second because it's very significant. But overall, we're delighted that close to 400 people have signed up for this call this morning, clearly showing that there's a significant interest in this topic and that we really need to focus on how we need to rebuild Ireland and the role that purpose will play in that conversation. It's great also to see that amongst the participants this morning, we have businesses, business associations, NGOs, government representatives, academia, and students. So great to see you all, and thanks for joining us. A couple of quick things. The session is being recorded, first and foremost. Secondly, we strongly encourage participation both online and offline. So by this I mean there is a Q&A function. It's on the center of the screen in the bottom. Please use that for questions and comments, and we'll come back to you during the session. And if there are some things we can come back to you offline with specific links and information, please do not hesitate. We'll be there. And if you're into social media and multitasking, bottom right of the screen, hashtag #BuildBackBetter and add BITC Ireland. So that's enough in terms of introductions. Secondly, I would like to say a few words about Business in the Community for those who don't really know us. Business in the Community was set up 20 years ago, and we are a movement for change in business. Over 100 companies are our members, and you can see them there on the screen in front of you. Some of Ireland's largest and most progressive companies have been working for us for many years. We build capacity within business to ensure that sustainability is commonplace in everything companies do and in every decision that business does. We are enabling that transition to more sustainable business models. We're also a forum for conversation, a forum for leadership, but we're also a forum for doing. And we strongly believe in collective action and transparency and collaboration. And collective action for us is happening through our low carbon pledge, and we'll talk about that later on. But we're also a forum for helping companies account for their practices and their journey to sustainable. And we do this through the Business Working Responsibly mark, and I will come back to that in a second, but the mark is a fundamental driver of change within business. Anyway, enough advertising for the moment. Let's go straight into the topic. And obviously, any conversation these days starts with COVID and ends with COVID. COVID has clearly brought significant change, disruption, and crisis. Economic crisis, jobs crisis, tax and fiscal crisis, and also an environmental crisis. Because although until a few weeks ago, it was really nice to hear birdsong in the morning here in Dublin, now we're hearing a lot of traffic. By the way, let's not forget that Siberia has had its highest temperature on record just last week. So even as we think that slowing down our economy is good for the environment, it's not good enough. And we cannot obviously stall economic activity forever. COVID has also brought a lot of stark contrast and has clearly shown inequality, digital divide, and some of the big challenges that our society was already facing. COVID just made it more clear, but it's not something new. But on the other hand, let's be fair and also acknowledge that COVID brought great community spirit, great solidarity and generosity. And in business, we have seen amazing flexibility, amazing resilience, and a great way of adapting to a new reality, which is also important. Today, we're going to start a conversation about how we rebuild our society, our economy, our systems to be future-proof, to be ready for that future that's ahead of us, the new normal that's already happening. But before we do that, I think it is fair that we stop for a second and ask ourselves some of the following questions. Was the system before COVID really delivering for us all? Was that system enabling a low carbon economy? Was that system facilitating inclusion and real diversity in our society and in our workplaces? Ultimately, was that system allowing companies to thrive in a transition to low carbon and sustainable, or was it stalling? And I think that's a fundamental point that would lead to the next issue, which is the great solidarity and community spirit we've seen, the great flexibility and adaptability, the great outreach for employees from companies. That cannot go back into a shelf in our library called crisis management. That has to be business as usual manual for any business leader. So let's make sure that that is also part of the conversation. Ultimately, let's ask ourselves, how will purpose help companies continue into this journey into sustainability and make them even more strong and resilient? In a moment, I'm going to ask my colleague, Maura Horgan, who is our head of marketing, to give us a sense of what we have seen over the past 100 days in business and the community, and in terms of business needs and business responses. And after Maura, I'm delighted that we're going to have a fabulous panel with three inspirational CEOs: Julie Ennis of Sodexo, Mark Foley of Ergrid, and Bernadette Lavery of Boots. I'll come back to them in a second. But before I hand you over to Maura, I just want to reflect for a split second in terms of some of the big headlines that we have seen out there, that in my view are heralding some sort of different vibes, some different changes. I'm going to talk about climate change and reputation, and I'll tell you why. Let's start with climate. A few weeks ago, we all heard about the close to 10 billion package that the French government put at the disposal of its national airline, Air France. Interestingly, the package of support is contingent to Air France achieving, not in 2050, but in 2030, a 50% reduction in the emissions per kilometer flown in its operations by 2030. And also the reduction and potential elimination of short-haul flights that can be replaced by efficient rail services. Similarly, a few weeks after that, we heard about the 3.75 billion package that the Spanish government provided to the car manufacturing industry, which is quite significant in that country, with a stringent set of conditions about investment into the betterment of the electric vehicle and hydrogen infrastructure in the country. And just staying with climate change, some of you who know us and have been to our events hear me mention BlackRock and the famous Larry Fink letter that he issues every year. At the beginning of this year, he sent a letter which strongly worded climate risk means investment risk. And I have to admit that sometimes I would have thought, you know, is this a bit of PR spin? What is this organization trying to do? BlackRock, which by the way is the largest asset management manager in the planet. Last week, the CEO of Volvo, Mr. Svanberg, survived a vote from investors that wanted to oust him as CEO of the company. Not because of his salary package, not because of the sales figures of the Volvo Corporation, but because of the perception by some investors that Volvo was failing to disclose appropriately its climate-related risks, and it was taking a limited action to tackle climate change within its pipeline of innovation. So interestingly, obviously, it was more than just words for Mr. Fink and BlackRock, because BlackRock was behind this vote for ousting the CEO of the company. And just to talk about reputation for a second, let me reflect again. We discussed this last year at our CEO event. 181 CEOs in August signed the Business Roundtable in the United States CEO statement on the purpose of a company. Good on them. They were the first ones to talk about purpose, and a very clear declaration of intent saying businesses have to be really serious about other stakeholders, not just shareholders. They need to be serious about their customers, their employees, and the community at large. When COVID began, we started to see cracks in the system. Some companies that had made very strong statements were failing to demonstrate with actions how they were protecting their employees with the most basic PPE, with paid sick leave, and with protection in terms of their well-being and mental health whilst working from home. So that gap there was evident. And an Edelman survey demonstrated that around 38% in a global survey felt that businesses were not putting people before profits. There's other examples of where this reputation conversation is going, and we saw that in the tragic and terrible assassination of George Floyd in Minnesota last month, where again, companies that perhaps were seen as being great advocates of protecting staff and customers during COVID failed in terms of their declarations of intent of what was the right thing to do in face of the terrible racism and their actions not matching them. So gaps there of trust, gaps there in how businesses acts and says, and let me add a couple of numbers to the conversation, and I'll finish now. Of the Fortune 500 CEOs, 1%, that means 5 of 500 are Black, all of which are men. And I know that tomorrow is Pride, and we're all going to be celebrating such a significant date. Many of our member companies and businesses out there will be marking the date. Interestingly, also to look at 3 of the Fortune 500 CEOs are openly LGBT. Now, I'll hand over to Maura in a second, but let me just say what's the point of all of this? Why does this matter to you and the businesses that you're managing? 3 reasons, very clearly. Number 1, talent. Even if you're not thinking about recruiting people at this point in time, you are desperately ensuring that you can retain that very valuable and significant talent in your own organization. So it is critical that the values of your employees align with your values. And if they feel that your company is not doing enough about climate change, is not doing enough about inclusion and inequality, there is a challenge and there could be potentially a problem. Reputation is another key issue. Porter Novelli put a survey around the month of April where 73% of interviewed people said that they were going to clearly remember the companies that did right and did wrong during the pandemic. What does that mean for you and your business? And ultimately, third and last, it's all about money, isn't it? And you heard about Larry Fink. At the beginning of the month, we had an event to launch our low carbon pledge, and I had the pleasure of interviewing the Financial Times journalist, Pilita Clark. And I'll close with this. Pilita said, investors are now more than ever looking for evidence and information of how companies are behaving during COVID. And that's part of our investment decisions. It's not about love. It's about looking for companies that are resilient, for companies that are sustainable during this terrible time. So let's now focus on the domestic front, and I'll ask my colleague Maura Horgan to take over from here and give us a sense of what we have seen over the last 100 days. What are the topics and the responses? Thanks, Maura.
Thanks, Thomas, and good morning, everybody. How are you doing? As Thomas said, this pandemic really has shone a light on the social inequality, not just around the world, but here in Ireland as well. And it's shown how if we tamper with nature, there are cataclysmic effects on our very fragile blue planet. But I'm an optimist. Why, you might ask? Well, I get to work every day with some of the most inspirational and knowledgeable people who've been working on driving the CSR and sustainability agenda for 20 years. But we also get to work with those fabulous 100 companies and many more companies on driving the agenda forward. So I'm going to give you a whistle-stop tour of what we've been up to with those companies, but I'm particularly going to focus in on giving you the stories that we hear on the ground from the people and the communities most impacted. I don't know if you know, but 55% of charities in Ireland are facing huge funding drops. Many of them will not and cannot survive. Our sister organisation, the brilliant Community Foundation for Ireland, a philanthropic organisation, they moved quickly early on. At the end of March, towards early April, they actually launched a COVID-19 relief fund for charities. We put the call out to our members and you definitely stood up. I just want to name check the 7 companies that gave really fantastic corporate donation support to that fund. Bank of Ireland and HSBC and Ulster Bank and KBC and Intel and Workday and Ervia. Thank you so much for stepping up to the mark. In those early days of March and April, our companies turned to us and said, what can we do to help our charities of choice, our community partners? And we were just saying, listen to them, find out what they need, both in the short term and the longer term. Double down on your commitments. For example, we would have worked with Lidl on creating that partnership with Jigsaw. And recently they've just recommitted to that partnership till 2022. Or Tesco launching new funds, or many more companies I don't have time to name check, but thank you. A big topic as well in those early days, and ongoing topic right now, is the area of employee engagement. Mental health is a massive challenge for all of us, and I'm sure many businesses out there, many NGOs, many of you personally, are really dealing with mental health challenges. So we worked with our companies on employee engagement, on pivoting to virtual volunteering, which is a real hot topic now. And I'm delighted to say next week, just watch out for our social media and website. We'll be promoting some case studies from our members of the great work they're doing on virtual volunteering and top tips from us here at Business in the Community. We cannot have a fair and equal society if we leave a young generation behind. That's why we've worked in education for 20 years. Quite simply, we match businesses with schools in the most disadvantaged areas all around the nation. We've helped 40,000 students to date. We have an army of business volunteers who mentor primary school children with literacy and numeracy, or help older children with mock interviews and CV skills, and just giving them hope that there's jobs for them in the future. In May, we ran a quite incredible webinar featuring people on the front line when it comes to education. We heard from Dr. Aideen Cassidy, a real hero now of mine, principal of a school in Finglas. Not only was she worried about homeschooling to kids who don't have access to technology, who were relying on mobile phones and mobile phone credit to actually access homeschooling, she was worried about some of those families not being able to put food on the table. Her and her incredible teachers not only were trying to deliver education, they were actually trying to deliver food to those vulnerable families. And this wasn't just Finglas. We heard from teachers in Cork saying the exact same thing. And I want to give a shout out to Gas Networks. They supplied that school and many others, not just with equipment, but with funding for those food drives as well. The digital divide is massive in this country. And it's great to see companies like IBM and Microsoft move so quickly and get their employees to deliver virtual training to teachers trying to get to grips with this new technology. At that same webinar in May, we heard from the well-known child psychologist, David Coleman, and his interview is on our social media channels. David said something that will stay with me, I think, forever. He said, children in disadvantaged areas will bear the brunt of this crisis. Even as everything opens up today and in the future, those effects will be felt definitely for a long time to come. David and the schools and teachers that we speak to every day on the ground tell us that they need business support now more than ever. Resilience is low for our young children in those disadvantaged schools. Having role models to look up to, having a sense that there are jobs out there in the future and to give them hope, that is huge. So thanks to all the companies, not just in our network, but many more hundreds of companies engage in our education programs. As Thomas said, the Black Lives Matter movement really has caused fascinating conversation about race and discrimination and authentic diversity and inclusion, not just in the States, but here in Ireland too. For years, over 15, 20 years, we've been running programs to help people in direct provision, migrants, people who have disabilities, people who suffer homelessness, get back into the world of work. We know that employment is the single biggest way to actually break the cycle of poverty. And as we reboot the economy, they must not be left behind again. We moved our training quite quickly to virtual training in those first months of lockdown. And thank you so much to the companies who stood by us and moved quickly with us. We have companies like BT who are now delivering virtual IT training. We have companies like KPMG and Accenture and A&L Goodbody and so many more, A&L Goodbody, who actually help with coaching or job skills or mentoring. Enterprise Rent-A-Car, who have delivered training with us for years as well. Thank you so much. And a big shout out to Marks and Spencer's as well. Retail's going through a tough time at the moment, but they are staying committed with us and even giving us work placements for some of our most vulnerable clients towards the end of the year. So thank you for staying the course with us. that really was just a whistle-stop tour of what we've been up to. I did not even get a chance to talk about our fabulous membership services team who work one-on-one with those companies. They help them on delivering their sustainability strategy. They help them navigating the complex world of ESG and understanding the Sustainable Development Goals, looking at human rights or sustainable procurement or measurement, or those companies who are now going through the business working responsibly mark. And we will be announcing those certified companies towards the end of the year. There can no longer be a debate about why a fair, inclusive and green economy makes business sense. There is a new wave, a new generation of talent, of customers, of investors, of voters who expect more of business. Empty statements on websites won't cut it. They want to see commitments, they want to see transparency, and they want to see accountability when it comes to tackling climate change and being authentically diverse and inclusive. I want to thank our 100 members for all that you've done over the last 100 days. I want to thank those companies who've been with us for the last 20 years. I particularly want to thank those companies who've recently joined us. Welcome to the network. And a huge thanks to those unsung heroes who are the CSR and sustainability professionals in our member companies who've been driving this agenda for years and continue to drive this agenda. We are with you all the way. So thank you so much. We truly believe that we can rebuild Ireland, but in a fair, sustainable and inclusive way. Thomas, back over to you. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Maura, and thanks for setting the scene into what have been some of the more concrete and direct issues that we have been facing and some of those responses. Now, let's move on to the panel, and just a reminder of the Q&A function there. If there are any particular questions, we'd love to hear from you. And let's go straight into the panel. So I will ask my panelists to turn on their cameras so we can all see you and start the conversation. So I'm delighted to be joined by 3 CEOs, 3 business leaders. I'll start from what I can see in my screen from left to right. So Julie Ennis. Julie, you're the CEO of Corporate Services UK and Ireland with Sodexo, and also country president here in Sodexo. Thank you for joining us, Julie. Mark Foley, next is the CEO of Airgrade. So great to see you, Mark. And Bernadette Lavery is the Managing Director of Boots in Ireland. And interestingly, Julie, Mark and Bernadette are joining from 3 different corners of the island. So this is a truly inclusive, in a geographical sense, presentation and conversation. So this is the conversation which is about rebuilding Ireland, and because it's a Friday and the weekend it's almost over, you know, we can. I obviously want to see where your companies are in terms of this journey and this process, but I'm also keen on understanding your own personal journey, as you know, driving businesses in difficult times like this or in challenging times like this, and trying to get a sense of what we can learn for the future. So I might start with you, Julie, if that's okay. And obviously, Sodexo is a global company, clearly very closely related to workplaces and many different places where, of work, I guess, all over the world. And clearly, the last few months have meant a lot of change in your business, almost, if I could say, a redefinition or a restatement of your business model. So why don't you tell us what that has meant for you, and how has been your journey driving the company both in the UK and Ireland in terms of that transition?
Sure, thanks, Tomas. You know, I think from a Sodexo perspective, what this crisis has done really is, you know, shone a light on what we do and the services that we provide to our clients. So if you think of workplace and all of our teams, so what it has done is effectively elevated workplace and the importance of that into the boardroom, actually as a strategic agenda item. So I suppose to give you some context, so some of the services that we would provide, so food services, facilities management, workplace design, cleaning, home care services, all of those have been impacted significantly by COVID. So we had to act very quickly, as you can well imagine. But I think in terms of leading the organisation through this, so in Ireland, we have just over 3,500 people, so right across the island of Ireland. And what's been really, really important to us is staying true to our purpose. And I know it's something that you talked about earlier. So for the past 50 years, it has and remains to be improving quality of life for all. So it was really important that we didn't forget that going through this this period. So I suppose in the context of COVID, that focus on people and quality of life, with a real emphasis actually on providing safe and secure workplace environments for people, have been really, really important for us, because that is what impacts an individual's ability to carry out their work both safely and efficiently. But it also plays a really, really important role in the promotion of health and well-being. So, I mean, you know, COVID has impacted businesses all across the globe. We've all had to reinvent our ways of working, and Sodexo are no stranger to that either. And we know that, you know, all of our lifelong behaviours have been changed. So we've needed to adapt, as I said, and support people and clients in different ways. You know, for us, even thinking about getting back into the workplace and getting clients back into the workplace, you know, opening the doors is not enough actually to get people back to work. So some of the really key lessons for me have been, and particularly because I only took over a new role on the 1st of March. So in a crisis situation like this, it's a team effort, because nobody has all the answers. And I suppose from my perspective and from an Ireland perspective, I can't stress how important that's been for us to work as a team in Ireland, but more importantly, globally. And I suppose why I say that is because one of the most important learnings for us was we were able to take the learnings and insights from our colleagues in China who were impacted before us, which gave us an invaluable head start to be able to adapt really quickly. I suppose another key lesson for me in this journey is around, you know, the importance of making decisions and making them quickly. And communicating constantly with our people, but also with clients, because, you know, from a client perspective, every organization has faced the similar concerns, I would say. So whether that is employee health and safety, managing office space, food, hygiene. So for us, as I said, making decisions about changing business models and how we delivered services was really, really critical. And I suppose it's you know, agility and pace being key. It's adapt or die, really. So one of the things that we did quite early on was we knew clients were looking for support around safe returns to work. So we adapted a program called Rise with Sodexo to bring all of our services and consider, you know, every aspect of a safe return to work, or new ways of working that we were seeing emerging all over the globe that we were able to bring to our clients in Ireland and in the UK. And I suppose the last piece and last lesson for me, and it's something I put up on LinkedIn recently, is the piece around, you know, the changes in workplace strategy and management. Because, you know, a big lesson for every organization is the importance of continuously focusing on future-proofing how we do business, how we operate businesses and deliver services, because nobody saw this coming. So, you know, we know digital is everywhere, and for us, actually, it's been a key enabler and for our clients, because if you think of technology, not only for remote working, but actually when people are coming back, you know, technology in terms of pre-ordering food, click and collect, sensor technology to look at occupancy, you know, all of that is really, really important. And I think one big piece for companies now is the insights into employee journeys are becoming more and more important, and the tools that you use in terms of workplace design, because more data means more important and more informed decisions, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And you know, one thing that I have to remind myself when I think of Sodexo, it's Sodexo is obviously a family-owned business, believe it or not. It's such a gigantic company, and it's so I'm sure values and must have weighed heavily on decisions. And I know this sounds really lovely to say from a theoretical perspective, but I can imagine that some of those difficult conversations obviously values must have had a significant weight, which is really interesting.
Yeah, a huge amount. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're talking, Julie, about technology, and it just reminds me, ultimately we've all been pushed in a way into this new home offices, and there's some exciting elements around it, but never forgetting that people centered side of technology. So obviously how fantastic it is, and I'm sure the three companies have seen this very clearly in your own businesses, but how then technology and people need to be together. And that's something that we're also working with our Worker of the Future subset and within our leadership in business and the community. And that's really very much about this new way of work and how we make sure that people are at the center of it and seeking best practices. Because I think the key point there, Julie, also of your introduction is all the unknowns that were there and having that capacity to navigate them. Mark, I might come to you for a second. Excuse me. At the beginning of the conversation, we're talking about business. We're talking about rising expectations towards business. And I think this is something that was coming for a while. It didn't happen overnight on the, 13th of March when we stopped working in the office. How do you process and see that as the CEO of EirGrid? Is this increasing? Is this becoming more challenging? Is there a better way of managing this sort of expectations?
Firstly, greetings from the Garden of Ireland in the heart of Wicklow on the most beautiful of summer days. And look, Thomas, it's a great pleasure to participate in this event. Short answer to your question, Thomas, is yes, yes, and yes. And I'll give evidence to that now in a couple of reflections over 4 or 5 points. Firstly, I genuinely believe that this experience of the pandemic will and should be game-changing. Horrible as it is for those who've lost a loved one. And we must remember at this point, every time we speak of this pandemic, this is not an academic experiment. If you've lost someone, your experience is manifestly different from those of us who've simply had to adjust our lifestyles and indeed our working patterns. So my first real point would be it is absolutely incumbent on business leaders to lead from the front in learning the lessons from this crisis and to take ownership of sponsoring a better world for all. And just in that, don't call it too early. We still don't have all the data, but be prepared and be committed to not be here in a year's time saying, we're back to the old normal and we didn't learn the lessons and we didn't sponsor change. So that would be my first point. My second point, and you'll hear in a lot of what I talk about the recurring theme of leadership, because leadership and this crisis has really tested the proposition around what is leadership and the role of leaders. And if I can just slightly digress a bit, I want to point to 2 examples. I point to Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, and I'm not saying he's perfect. None of us are as leaders, but he is an example of someone who has shown real leadership in this pandemic, and he has brought the nation with him on a very challenging journey. And then if we look at the other end of the spectrum and we have Donald Trump, who has failed to lead, has driven, I suppose, a divisiveness into US political or public and political discourse without precedence in American history. So we really have to look at the lesson here, not just the learnings from the crisis, but the issue of leadership. Because the next crisis, the one we must start to get our arms around in a very, very different way than we have in the past, is tackling the climate emergency. When COVID has passed, and maybe it won't pass totally, but that at least it has diminished in terms of the intensity of what we have faced and are continuing to face as outbreaks and resurgence of same is happening in many parts of the world. My third point would be the working from home experiment is likely to have profound consequences for how we work into the future. It has been very successful in the main, although we still don't have the data around the productivity impact. But I think when we look at the need to drive a low carbon agenda and also maybe to tackle once and for all some of the work-life balance challenges that young professionals with families have, again, it's really something that we as leaders have to grasp. Secondly, the coincidence of this pandemic with other major issues of social justice around the world, whether it's Black Lives Matter, as you mentioned earlier, Tomas, or the emerging theme around a just transition to a low carbon society, I think has created a greater sense of us, of leaders, to look more holistically at both the economy and society in pursuit of a better world for all. So when we start to talk about the climate emergency, and I hope that is very shortly, and particularly if we get a government by close of business today, I expect and hope climate will start to dominate the narrative once COVID has at least been relegated to sort of second position in terms of the issues of importance. The issue of justice and fairness will inevitably enter public discourse. We can't deliver on the climate ambition at any price, and not at the expense of social justice. So for me, the great challenge for leaders and for politicians is in this space. I don't doubt the capacity of technology or infrastructure to deliver. I've been at this stuff for over 20, 30 years in my career. The technology is there, the infrastructure propositions are there. This is about people, and it's about two things. Will they accept the transition, and will they come on the journey with us? And secondly, can we assure them they won't be penalized on the journey, that they won't be casualties lost as we drive the low carbon agenda? The last point is in this, and I'm really comfortable and happy and relieved that there's a unanimous view that the economic response should be based on a major investment stimulus and not on the austerity construct that we've suffered in the last decade. And I'm not saying we don't have responsibility for our debts, anything but with a concerted effort, we may be able to achieve a level of economic and societal transformation in the next decade that might previously never have been impossible. And that might be the great benefit from this awful pandemic, that it has radically transformed the minds of politicians, economists, and leaders, and that we collaboratively and collectively face up to this challenge. And I look in the mirror, and any leader should do. My responsibility and leaders' responsibility is to make sure we're not looking back in 10 years' time, or the young generation are not bemoaning the fact that leaders fail them.
Enough, and I think that's really important. And I like the analogy between business leaders and government leaders, and very clearly different sides of the coin, for sure. Thank you, Mark. Bernadette, I might put that to you as well. I mean, in terms of this growing gap of trust, I guess, or this growing societal business gap that we're seeing out there, maybe more exacerbated in the United States, but where do you see that going? And obviously, I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at a major company, nationwide presence. So obviously very present in very many different communities. I'm sure you probably have a different story from a different part of the island. But from where you sit, Bernadette, where do you see business kind of trying to confront or to tackle that gap and adapting to what COVID has brought unexpectedly as well?
Okay, so look, I'll talk about that from a number of perspectives, Tomas. And just to say, look, good morning, first of all, and good morning to everyone out there that I can't see. Look, from where I see this and the trust gap that exists, I think that the whole purpose, the need for organizations to adapt how they act, how they respond in this time has increased more than ever. You know, in Boots, it's something that we talk about a lot. We were really proud to score highly we scored number 3 in the RepTrack survey. But that to me means that that now comes with a continued expectation to refocus on purpose and to refocus on the needs of society. And actually, I'll speak a little bit about it from our own perspective and what we saw through this crisis. So for me, what I saw was that COVID really highlighted the need for businesses to reconnect on their core purpose and to respond to the needs of consumers and to respond to the needs of society. And from a Boots perspective, we get a lot of appreciation for the work that we do in communities. We're a pharmacy-based business, and we got a lot of appreciation for the role that we played through COVID. Very simple things from, connecting with the vulnerable, making sure that patients received their medication, and that we created a safe environment for the public, actually, because we were one of the few retailers that continued to be open throughout the whole of the crisis. And it was very challenging in the early days. But as we moved through the COVID situation, we saw other things come to the fore. And Moira referenced it a few minutes ago when she talked about the very unfortunate rise in domestic violence, and the numbers around that increased very drastically through that time. And actually, one of the things that we were able to do was to respond to that quite quickly with the Safe Ireland organisation. And because of our coverage across the country, we were able to create a safe space. So for anyone who was affected by domestic violence, we created a space in our pharmacy consultation rooms where they could go in and they could access local information. So the information that they needed in their community to find out what they needed to do, or who they could contact, or just the general advice that they might need in that situation, in order to look after themselves, to protect themselves. And actually, some of the feedback that we had from what seemed like quite a simple action actually was very changing, and definitely changed the situation and the lives of many families. So that was something that we were able to respond to through this crisis. It was something that prior to this, the awareness of that hadn't been what was needed, and we were able to create that. Equally, we've seen situations with the increase in anxiety, mental health issues, people needing additional support. And again, being able to support that, we've been involved with the Green Ribbon campaign for a long time, but being more proactive about mental health and the awareness around that, again, it was something that increased through the COVID situation that we've been able to react to. And our business has been able to respond in a way that has made a difference and supported local communities through those situations.
And can I ask you, because obviously I think one of the leadership lessons from this last few months, if I read Julie and Mark correctly, they've all been about, I guess, bravery. And it was very brave to look after domestic violence. It's probably not a glamorous subject to support when you look at your traditional charity community. Was it hard to make that decision, Bernadette? How did you come about to realizing that was the role for Boots at this point in time?
Look, I would say that the Boots company was founded 170 years ago, and it was founded around a purpose, and it was a purpose to really bring affordable healthcare to those that were less well off in society, to those people that were disadvantaged and that needed help and maybe couldn't access it or couldn't afford it in the situation that they were in at that time. And actually, our role as Boots Ireland is something that we take very seriously. We're really, really committed to that, and our colleagues love it. Our colleagues are the people that help us, that drive us, that help us to decide where we should invest our energies and just put our efforts into. And actually, we do, as you say, work with a large number of organisations across Ireland. We've had a number of partnerships, and let me just tell you about some of those for a moment. So One that is people will be very aware of will be our partnership with the Irish Cancer Society. We've had that since 2012, and part of that is where we raise money for night nursing. So the money, the effort that we put there, that goes to raise funds for night nurses. And those night nurses are able to go into homes right across Ireland, across all communities, for everyone, so that people can die in the comfort of their own homes. They support those final days, they support families at that time. And it is incredible work actually that they do. And, you know, it's that part of our partnership we are very proud of. And we were also able to do things at our shops. So we're able to provide cancer advice through our pharmacists. They will signpost where people should access information. And actually we're also able to, we have what's called Boots Beauty Cancer Advisors. And those colleagues are trained on how to help people with the visible symptoms or the visible effect of their cancer treatment. And it's a great partnership that we have, and you know, the feedback that we get is amazing. But that hasn't stopped through COVID. Those needs still exist in this time, and actually one of the things that we have been able to do is adapt how we work that. So we've been able to create virtual consultations with our beauty advisors. We've got many colleagues who are participating in virtual walks and millions of steps, and continuing to support that and that fundraising. And that will go to continue to support those situations where that haven't gone away. They still exist, and we need to be able to create opportunities to support them. You know, a couple of other things that we're involved with. One is the Understand Together campaign. So that's something, again, probably close to a healthcare agenda, where we know that there are now 55,000 people living in Ireland with dementia. And one of the really important things for them is that they can continue to engage in their communities. And through a partnership with Understand Together, we're trying to make sure that we have dementia inclusive communities, and simple things like, can those people, can they shop? Can they engage with their normal routine? And can they, how can we work together to remove barriers to allow that to continue to happen? It's really important work, and I think that is something that we will see growing over the coming years. So we need to think about how we will support that in our communities. Absolutely. And Thomas, the final one I'll talk about a little is our work that we do through business in the community with the education programme. Again, it's really important work for us because it's mutual benefit. It's benefit for our business, but it's also benefit for the people that we interact with. And what we do is we have partnerships with a number of DEIS schools, right from Letterkenny to Cork and Tala and lots of places in between. And we work in particular with disadvantaged areas and pupils that would have come from families where there's maybe no employment history, they don't have the skills within their remit, or the people they interact with on interview skills or communication skills, or things that will make the difference in getting them into a life where they can get employment, fund themselves, be independent, have families, all of those things that you know, many people strive to do. But we see that actually, and we get lots of feedback from students around the benefits that has given them. Many just engage more with school and stay on, do their exams, and as a result get a career and have you know, better outcomes. But actually for us as a business as well, it's been really good because we have been able to involve our teams, involve our colleagues, and they develop skills too. So they're able to develop their skills and coordinate a program, for example, or they also get to see the importance of inclusion. And we'll try to involve our store managers, our graduates, so our pharmacy intern graduates who come into us at that early stage of their career, giving them the opportunity to see what all of our society looks like, and to really see the importance of inclusion and the difference that they can make through small activities that we can invest in. And we do get great direction, encouragement, and support through business in the community, and it's a partnership that works very well for us too. So I know Maura mentioned it earlier in our intro, but we're delighted to be part of that as well. We see the difference that it makes.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you're making a huge difference. But I like the way when I was asking about one of your business drivers, and you said our people love it.
Yeah,
so I think it's really it really talks a lot about the type of businesses and the type of leader that you are. But just talking about people, Julie, can I come back to you and ask you, obviously in terms of the big process of change, again, what have been your top tips or your top lessons in terms of engaging staff through this process, which I'm sure, and it's funny, people here, I'm looking at some of the questions and everybody's asking about the financial fortunes of all the companies in the panel and asking a lot of those things. But I mean, beyond that, it's change, it's uncertainty, people want to know. So what have been your top sort of tricks in terms of engaging such a diverse and large workforce?
Sure. Thanks, Tomas. I mean, Sodexo, we're a very people-focused organisation. We always have been. And I think the one thing that has been really important for us is from the start of the crisis, we put people front and centre, and we were very open, actually, and transparent with them. So, I mean, there were a few priorities that we wanted to focus on. One was making sure that we were communicating with our employees openly and honestly. We wanted to make sure we were keeping people safe, so our own people, but also our clients and their employees. And fundamentally, we wanted to try and keep people in jobs and fully paid. So that was, I suppose, where we were really focusing on. But I mean, we're also conscious that, there's a lot of people who were impacted throughout. So if you think about, Ireland and the UK, so I have the UK business now as well since the 1st of March. We had to put a lot of people on furlough in the UK, and I'm very, very conscious that, people can be impacted financially. So we set up an employee relief fund. So that those that are most vulnerable and most impacted can get additional support. But I think, the big piece is really around communication. So whether it be through town halls or lots and lots of employee comms, that has been really, really important, but actually being very open and transparent in it. I mean, it was critical for us to make sure that people were staying engaged because, everything was so uncertain. We had some business that was open, some that was partially open, some that was closed or that were closed. And I think what we've all learned from an employee experience and engagement perspective is, COVID has just disrupted everything. And, we talk a lot about employee well-being, and it's so much more than actually the absence of illness. It's very, very broad. So I think now more than ever, it is critical that all businesses lead with a people-first strategy. And that can only be achieved when everybody's working together. It's not a HR thing. It's HR, it's IT, it's real estate, it's facilities management. It's everybody working together to make sure that people can actually perform at their best safely. And I think that is going to be more and more important, in terms of attracting and retaining staff and making sure that employee well-being is always at the I suppose, front and center. And particularly, actually, and you touched on it earlier on, mental well-being. Mental well-being for people working outside the office is actually more important. We need to focus even more because not everybody is comfortable with that. And one thing that has been very important for us in Sodexo is making sure that, as I said, we're true to our purpose, and our employees are very proud of that. So, we wanted to make sure that we had that we were demonstrably showing employees that and trying to keep them involved. So one of the things, we've worked very closely with Focus Ireland for many, many years, and we wanted to make sure that, we're supporting them with their family centre, particularly through times like this. So our employees expect it. Actually, it's key for employee engagement. One of the things we did last week in the UK, we were one of 29 organisations to sign up to, fully accountable actions for improving Black inclusion in the workplace, given everything that has gone on over the last number of weeks. So, I mean, for us, improving economic, social, environmental sustainability is more than an aspiration. It's part of what we do. We have, every business needs to do it. And it's why, we work so closely with you guys in BI TCI and are very proud actually about the business working responsibly, Mark. And that has been really key for us, because what it does is it gives us that rigor, but more importantly, third party, I suppose, validation that we're doing the right things, and that the company's sustainability roadmap is right, but it also allows us, I suppose, learn from others, and importantly allows us differentiate ourselves in what is a very, very competitive market. So it's really, really important for us, that we continue to make that progress. As I said, our employees expect it, and it's one of the key drivers for engagement, certainly from our perspective.
Super. Thanks, Julie. And I think that's really, really valuable. I'm looking at my clock here that's running, and you think that these things will take forever. Mark, Shaun here on the Q&A is asking, and I'm sure the answer for that is yes, does future proofing involve reducing flights and more online meetings? So I presume yes is the answer to that.
I think the short answer is yes. We've proven it in the last 3 months, 4 months. If anybody makes the argument that they have to travel to Brussels for a meeting, they need one hell of an argument, because we can get the business done. I think this paradigm is going to change irrevocably.
Absolutely. Mark, final question to you. Collaboration will be critical here, and you are talking about just transition, climate change. How are you sensing, growing appetite for this kind of world of collaboration in terms of the big ticket items and your own journey here?
I'll talk in the BITC context, and I'll talk in our own business. And I'm conscious the clock is running down very, very quickly. The low carbon group on sustainability within Business in the Community family, which I lead in conjunction with Dennis O'Sullivan, is probably a very good exemplar. Launched in 2018, 58 CEOs across a range of sectors have signed up to reducing Scope 1 and Scope 2 CO2 emission intensity by 50% by 2030. And frankly, and let's be very honest in this conversation today, it was a very modest ambition. And I respect people might have been concerned at the beginning of it. But we're all already waking up to the notion that we need to expand our ambition, move to Scope 3 emissions, including water, waste, and indeed just what you mentioned, Thomas, which is business travel, which really needs to be looked at. We've produced 2 annual reports. Our progress to date has been very good, but it hasn't been good enough. And ultimately, the aim is for all signatories to start thinking about science-based targets. And science-based targets ultimately ensure that the ambition actually matches the needs of the Paris Agreement. It ensures what we do is fully correlated with what Paris has asked us to do, and that we can deliver the outcome. And it does protect us from maybe some tokenistic and, one might argue, disingenuous approaches that company might deploy to look good, but actually not to be having an impact. So I would say to anybody in the 378 people who are on the call here, if you're not part of Business in the Community, or you're not part of the low carbon pledge, ask yourself why not, because there's no reason why you shouldn't be, particularly if you're serious about tackling climate change, etc. Secondly, collaboration is the future. This will be the defining decade of collaboration, in my view, and of partnership. And we in EirGrid, who have the ambition to have a power system that can handle practically 100% renewables, and just last Friday/Saturday, we were about 75%, including that what we were exporting to the UK. We can't do that without help. The technology involved will be world leading. We're out to find help, and we'll get some of the best people in the world to work with us. Delivering is about working together. It's about collaboration. It's about partnership. And we've put that center stage in our strategy.
Super. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark, and for encouragement for more people to join in. I have to close, and before this system disintegrates itself and you're all sent back into your Friday lunchtime, I first want to say thank you to the audience for joining us. There's some really good questions that do deserve us a standalone question, and they'll get it back from us. Secondly, to thank Julie, Mark, and Bernadette for taking the time, for the encouragement, for being such good ambassadors, to Moira and my colleague Lorraine for being here. Two quick things. The first one is to let you know that tonight RTE does Comic Relief. Our sister organization, the Community Foundation for Ireland, is involved as the recipient, and it's a superb initiative, and I hope that anybody can dial in, join in, donate, but also if any corporate wants to get involved, do let us know. My bottom line is, I think I'll just echo what Mark said. We need more collaboration. We need systemic change. We all need to be a critical mass. So please make sure you're part of this movement. That we cannot do this alone. That is the bottom line, and it's about your businesses, but it's also about Ireland. And Ireland has been so successful in building a name internationally for so many great things. Let's make sure that that great name keeps being built in terms of its competitiveness, its low carbon, and its inclusion. So thank you, everybody. Apologies, I've stolen 2 extra minutes of your morning. Thanks, Julie, Mark, Bernadette, everybody, and have a fantastic weekend. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.